Okay, everybody, welcome to the live stream. I'm Dr. Noble, developmental pediatrician and geneticist. And today, if you are watching this live stream and you are seeking to answer one question, how do I navigate the complicated milieu of autism? You have an autistic child. You yourself have been diagnosed with autism. This is your live stream or your upload. If you have questions, put them in the comment section and I'll put them on the screen and we'll talk. Put them in the comment section on the upload and we will do the same. Today on our live stream, you are in for a treat. This is our special guest for today is Amber Arrington. Amber is a ferocious autism advocate. She is a mother to 6 children. You heard me correct. 6 children, 3 of whom are autistic. Autism was once a word that she feared and has become a word that she now loves. She helps parents navigate an autism diagnosis and the landscape as a whole. She educates moms about available services and connects them with appropriate professionals and providers. Amber helps parents become autism savvy so they can know the best next steps to take for their child. Welcome to the stage, Amber Arrington. Amber, thank you so much for being here. It's an honor, a blessing, and a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Oh, Dr. Noble, I'm super excited to be here.
No, I think Brett, thank you. Let me bring up the comment. I think he's right. It was on my side. I think I had a button pushed I shouldn't have had. So I'm sorry, Amber, if I caused you pain and suffering.
Ooh.
Tell us, let's get started. Tell us a little bit. How did you get to this spot in the journey? We've connected. I've known you now for a couple months.
Yeah.
Bring us up to speed a little bit on your journey and how we got to be where we are today with you. To bring us up to speed.
Okay, here's the summary. So, as Dr. Noble said, I am a mother to 3 autistic kids. These kiddos range between, well, they're 3 and they're 5 and they're 20. So, I have been an autism mom, so to speak, for a really long time. And I decided to start a company, Autism Savvy. I decided I was going to put all my time and effort into supporting parents navigating autism through this company. And then I decided to put on a summit this month for Autism Awareness Month. Yeah. So the Autism Savvy Summit, which I know we'll talk about, but I basically hunted Dr. Noble down, which was not easy to do. I saw you on TikTok and I commented, and then I saw you on YouTube and I had to hunt down your email address somehow and then say, please, I'm looking for someone who can come speak about sleep. And finally we connected. And that's why we're here today, ultimately.
Yes. Thank you for being ferocious. You're right. Physicians tend to be hard to nail down. And so we tend to, I'm glad that you were able to connect with us today. So you have 6 kids, as we've discussed, 3 of which have been diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder, or have been diagnosed autistic. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about, when that first became something that you were navigating in your life. Tell us a little bit about how it all started.
So with my oldest son, it was a long time to piece all of his diagnoses together. At first we found out by age 4 he was dealing with anxiety. And shortly after, it was ADHD. Teachers wanted me to medicate him. That was a whole thing. Finally leaned into that, got the medication that worked for him. But then there were still these other things. And eventually, got a 504 in place at school for him, got an IEP in place at school for him, had an educational designation for autism at school. But it wasn't until he was age 12 that I had an official medical diagnosis for autism for him, combined with an official learning disability in reading and writing, and then pair that with his ADHD and anxiety. It was just this whole cocktail of things he was battling and me trying to put it all together. So that was the first one.
So 12. Okay. So again, this is for, people watching. In my experience, a diagnosis in a 12-year-old would be pretty late. Did you have concerns about an autism spectrum disorder prior to that? I mean, how early on in that process were you before you started asking questions, and who did you ask those questions to?
I started asking questions probably by the time he was age 2, honestly. But, autism 18 years ago
Yeah.
is not the autism that we know about now. And nobody was suggesting it to me. Certainly the ADHD was prevalent, but I think even back then, Dr. Noble, they wouldn't diagnose ADHD and autism together. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that you're asking a fair question. We didn't really understand the comorbid nature of individuals diagnosed on the spectrum. I think that it's something that we're really starting to understand more so now. It's certainly not uncommon to manage several different difficulties simultaneously. So you're correct.
Yeah.
So they thought ADHD and learning stuff, and you're like, I don't know.
Yeah, there was more to it, and I remember going to his pediatrician who I went specifically to help manage his ADHD medication.
Okay.
And I was like, but there's still this and there's still the social things and he's still struggling here and da 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 da. And he said, listen, I'm your regular run of the mill pediatrician. I don't know. You need to go have him evaluated by this Mel Med Center,
Ah,
which I did. And they screened him for autism then. I remember this, but this
yeah.
was before 2013. So it was, he was being screened for Asperger's.
Ah, okay.
And they like he scored something like 80% on whatever this assessment was, where 80% was the maybe he has Asperger's. But I didn't know what having a diagnosis would yield him. And so I just didn't push for it at that point.
Okay. Got it. So so this is important. Did you see benefit in treating ADHD? Did you think, okay, maybe that's what it was because things got so much better on a medicine, or did you still see, some of the social issues that were becoming more problematic? Like how did he respond?
Well, when we had the right ADHD medication, it did help while it helped. Like it would help for a few hours a day while he was at school. At
Yeah.
home, we had the worst of him, so to speak.
Oh,
Because his medication would wear off and we'd
yep.
get that impulsivity and that hyperactivity and a little bit more aggression when that would wear off. So we let him burn through his meds at school, and then at home it was a nightmare. But then even at school while he was medicated, like there was still these social aspects that he was struggling with for sure. He didn't like team sports, things like that.
Yeah. So you got pretty, savvy on what are some of the early signs or concerns. And then so this is another question I have for you. So oftentimes people ask, or one of the difficulties that we run into in the clinic is, if we use the diagnosis of an autism spectrum disorder, if we diagnose somebody autistic, when an individual's 12, what from your perspective changed? Like what
Okay.
therapies and services opened up for you? Like what, because this is a common question people have is like,
Yeah.
what difference is it going to make? What happens next? So what in a 12-year-old, what happened?
Okay, so I want to definitely speak to that because, like I said, I knew that like maybe there was this Asperger's thing. I didn't know anything about autism then, but I didn't know what it would yield me. Right? I didn't know until I actually had a client one day. I used to be a service provider for lashes and brows, so I'd have people on my table for hours, one on one. And this particular client I had ran several group homes in the state I live in, Arizona, for men with disabilities. And she would talk to me about like the state disability services and her group homes. And I would lament about all the things I was struggling with my son. And she, were it not for her, saying, hey, maybe you need to get him these DDD services, which here is the Department for Developmental Disabilities.
Yes.
I said, I don't know. I mean, I think we're doing okay. And she's like, yes, you're doing okay now. But what about when he gets older? And what
Right.
about when you get older? And you could have all of these supports and services and habilitation and respite and all of these things. And so because she said that, I moved for that state disability designation so that I could unlock these services for him, but I needed a medical diagnosis for autism in order to apply for that. So
Right.
that's what started. So then there were actually so many services that opened up for him that were paid for by the state.
Yeah.
And there was horse therapy, and there was seeing a counselor, and there was medication management, and there was respite, like I said, and HAB, and these type of things.
Yes, and I like that you underscore the importance of a medical diagnosis, because I know we feel that strain not only in the state of Iowa or Arizona, but and I think in a lot of the states around the country, and that there's usually only a handful of individuals who the state will allow
Mm.
to diagnose an autism spectrum disorder. Psychologists, psychiatrists, developmental pediatricians. There may be others in other states, but the diagnostic burden on those individuals or those service lines is high, so it creates a long wait list. But to your point, when the diagnosis was clarified, a lot of things opened up, and you alluded to DDD. In the state of Iowa, I think we'd call it like a waiver services, or
Yeah.
it has different terms to be used. But okay, so when you received the diagnosis, the DDD services, did they open up for you because of the diagnosis of autism, or was
Yes.
it because there was an intellectual disability, or what was there other confounding factors, or was autism enough to help?
In Arizona, um, in Arizona, autism is one of the main criteria categories that will allow the
Wow.
child to qualify for DDD services. And
Wow.
then you have to apply for the long-term care, which is the
Right.
financial piece that pays for the
Yes.
DDD services. And
Yes.
it's a whole thing, and not everybody qualifies, and the stars have to align. But they
Yes.
did for him, and they did for us.
Okay. Okay. So there was a tremendous amount of value. Now, what about with school? Now, I know we got other kids to talk about, because I want to hear about your experience with all these. But there's another common question people have. People ask me, should I share this information with the school? Is
Yeah.
what school going to do different? How is the IEP going to change? Is there an IEP? What happened at school? As a mom with with this new diagnosis and clarification in the child, what changed at school?
He was struggling a lot at school, and so I did eventually get, like I said, this 504 plan in place, and eventually an IEP in place. Before he even had the autism designation, I had those things in place for him, but he was still struggling. He was being pulled for resource, like special education. But it
Mhm.
was this one day where it was the end of the school year, and there was a Mother's Day presentation, and the teacher was demanding that he memorize this paragraph for his part in the play. Well, he couldn't do it. He just couldn't do it. And
Yeah.
this one day, he was being put on the spot to say his lines. He didn't know his lines.
Mhm.
He broke down crying. And
Mhm.
I don't know, something about that moment. I just went, okay, we have all the supports in place that school can do here, and he's still struggling so much. I need a different school. I was opting for a private school
Mm.
that I needed special funding for it. And in order to get the funding, I needed autism to be the primary designation on the IEP. And so that's why we ended up with this educational designation before I had a medical one. And that allowed me to send him to private schools, and then the state would pay for it.
Oh, this is interesting. Okay. So, okay. This is very interesting. So in the state of Iowa, and maybe it's similar, if you go to a private school,
Mhm.
the likelihood of you receiving the same level, and not that they don't exist, they do. I'm a big fan of all schools in the state of Iowa, of course, but oftentimes individuals who have been diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder stay in the public school system because the IEP supports are more readily accessible to them. But from your perspective, that was a decision that you made. You said, should we do public, or should we
Mhm.
do private? And in your situation, a private school was advantageous.
I thought it would be, because in some of these autism specific private schools,
Oh,
or
okay.
learning disability specific private schools,
Okay.
they have speech, they have OT, they will validate, they will use your IEP. Even though they don't have to, they will. A good one will.
Okay.
And so you can, I'm not saying there's very few like really good schools for autism
Yeah.
in Arizona,
Sure.
but we bounced him to a few different ones until we found the one he graduated from, which was not an autism specific school, by the way. It was a learning disability specific private school.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it for us, it felt like better options to not do public school.
Okay. Because families that do seek a private school system, usually they'll ask that question. They'll say, should we move? I hear that a lot. Should we move to
Yeah.
another state? there's an autism school in Southern whatever, and I'm going to go there because they specialize in this. And sounds like that might have been one of your steps, and it wasn't a great fit. How could that not, I mean, explain that. What about it wasn't a good fit was from your perspective? I'm assuming you were surprised.
Why public school wasn't a good fit?
No, when you went to a private school
Oh,
specializing in serving individuals with
yeah.
an autism diagnosis, you would think on the surface, well, that would be great. This would be wonderful.
Because everybody does autism different.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they have, autism is this spectrum, and it's not the linear spectrum that we think. It's
Yep.
like this pie chart spectrum. And so there he was. A lot of these schools just are like babysitting. They're just sticking these non-speaking level 3 kids in front of a computer, and they're not teaching them anything. And they're not, so it was just like, and he is considered high functioning, but he wasn't functioning at a level well enough that I felt he was doing well at the regular public school. So he just kind of was in this weird space where he needed something special.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, it sounds like he's got some real nice skills, but needed some additional supports. And so you made some transitions and you got him. Now, how old is he now?
He's 20, and I'll just say this for your audience. We did seek guardianship for him when he was 18, and we got it. And even though he's quote unquote high functioning level 1, he lives in a habilitation group home now.
Wow. Is he working and just living a good life and all the things?
He's living his best life. He's not working at the moment, but we just got him qualified for vocational rehab. So we hope to get him moving in that direction.
Oh my goodness. Got some roommates and living it. Just this guy. Okay. Okay. So, you've been down this road, and tell me about the experience when you had another child. And I'm assuming that your perspective was very different. Tell us about that.
Yeah. And maybe not in the way you would think, but my oldest 4 children, we adopted them as babies.
Okay.
And so these little girls that I end up having 20 years into my marriage because of IVF, finally working, I'm thinking I have autism nowhere on my radar. Like, it took me 20 years to ever get pregnant. And then I finally had my miracle baby.
Yeah.
And I've been doing autism for 16 years at this point, even though I didn't always know it. I was doing hard. It was hard. Like, it was hard. It's not his fault, but it just was hard for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, and nowhere on my radar. My next oldest kid is 11 years older. I haven't had a baby in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, it's COVID, because Mallory, who is now 5, she turned 1 January 2020. I got pregnant again January 2020. COVID hit March of 2020.
Wow.
So you just have to think between 1 and 2, we're just stuck at home. And I haven't had a baby for a long time. And autism is nowhere on my radar because, like, my higher power is not going to do that to me again, is kind of what I thought, or something.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I was missing signs. I didn't easily see it. But by the time she was about 26 months old, so she was 20 months when I had the baby, she treated the baby like a piece of furniture, gave her no attention at all.
Okay. Yeah.
She wasn't clapping, pointing, waving. She wasn't saying mom and dad. She had some words, but they were one word, like they weren't sentences. Mm-hmm. She was scripting, she was hand leading, things like this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. And so then you're on a similar journey, but you're on the other end. You're on the young, like the 2 and 3 year old. Mm-hmm. And so you stepped into that so what happened next? Who'd you go to see at that point?
I did a telehealth with her. Well, first of all, the pediatrician was looking at me a little bit like sideways when I took the baby in for a check. And I'm like, Mallory doesn't pay attention to the baby. What do you think about that? And he started asking me questions, which I knew he was alluding to, do we need to be looking at autism?
Sure.
And I thought that was crazy. Because actually I thought she was so smart. She knew she was 2 and she knew her letters, numbers, shapes, colors, like she could count to 10, some stuff like this.
Yep.
But anyway, one day it hit about 26 months and my husband said something to me and I was like, oh yeah, something's probably wrong. I should get her looked at. I was so lucky. Within 6 weeks, I was able to get her in with someone and she had a diagnosis.
Wow.
At 27 months. That was really, really lucky. I attribute some of it to my experience with advocating and like getting after stuff, like I
Yep.
hunted you down, you know.
Yep.
But also I think I just got lucky. And so 27 months she was diagnosed.
So, you know, the questions that people ask in a 3-year-old are different oftentimes than they do in a 12-year-old. So the 3-year-old, you know, you transitioned or maybe early childhood special education. You're thinking about preschool. You're thinking about a lot of different things. You know, and people have there's a crossroads in therapies because the neurocognitive window is open and we're trying to maximize that. So can you give us an overview, like when you have a new toddler, which is probably a lot of people who are going to be watching this, they're going to say, well, my kid's not 12, my kid's 2 or 3. So like what you're
Yeah.
describing, what of the tell us what therapeutic interventions were most useful to you. I don't want to lead by giving my list of things. I want to hear from you as a mom. What of the things that you did in the toddler age range was like, yes, like this is awesome. This was great.
Well, definitely we did start with early intervention. So I got her qualified for that, and she was having speech once a week and OT every other week. That was not awesome because it was still COVID and it was all like telehealth.
Hmm.
And I just really wished that they were like in my home doing it with her rather than like, I didn't like that. But eventually that died down. So we started out with speech and OT through early intervention. They did try to funnel her into, I got her an IEP and she could have gone to the developmental preschool, but you know, at the public school. But I got her directly into ABA services. There was this ABA based community preschool that I got her in. About, I forget, 27 hours a week she spent doing speech, OT. Well, it was 27 of ABA plus speech and OT for a while. Now, what did I like of it all? All of it, I think. Like, I can't pinpoint. Probably she got the most time in her ABA services, and she blossomed so fast. She ended up graduating from speech therapy like when she was 4. She just didn't need it anymore. Got out of regular OT. Now she's in OT for feeding therapy. That's been about a year since she's been doing that. I don't know. It's some combination of all the things and catching her so young and being very active as a parent and learning everything that the professionals are doing with her so I could implement them at home. Somewhere in all of that, I've been really happy with everything, actually.
I love this. Okay. I have like 50 more questions now. So the analogy I share with families is, listen, it's one thing to go to a mechanic and drop off the keys and say, you got to fix this car. But then when the mechanic starts asking questions like, well, what exactly do you want to say? And then you just walk out. Like, that's not an effective way to get services implemented, right? You need to give information. You need to be a part of the process to some extent. Sometimes I run into families, as much as I love them and as much of a struggle as they have, they're overwhelmed, they're burnt. I get it. But you said something in your story that I just think is so valuable that the internets of the world need to hear. And that is, you actively engaged with the professionals. I'm assuming it's speech and it's OT and it's ABA, so that you could understand to some extent what they're doing and that you could, in effect, implement those strategies in the home environment. Did I get that right? Like, that's what you did. Okay. Because that is the single best example of the type of parent advocate that I sincerely hope we can, raise up. I often joke whenever we meet with legislators and folks, I say, listen, we don't need more providers. I mean, we do, but we'll never get them. What we need is to capitalize on the single greatest workforce in human history, and that is dedicated, loving, and focused parents. They will work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for $0. But we got to train them. We got to teach them. Parents are not dumb. They're not. They're smart people. They can learn all the things that they need to learn to whatever extent or capacity that they have available. And you did it. Okay. So I love that. I absolutely love that. And I'm glad we got that captured. An additional follow-up question.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you're smart. You've been in autism. You've been in the realm of autism therapeutics for a long time. Some people watching this are going to hear ABA and they're going to say, I don't I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, totally.
they're going to say, I don't know. I've read things about it that didn't feel good. I have thoughts about this that, I just need more information. And and I want to make sure I heard you correctly, because I agree with you. Like, this is the things that we advocate for. We advocate for access to ABA therapy. From your perspective, ABA therapy was useful. Can you explain just briefly, because people don't know what it is, but from a parent's perspective, what was ABA for you? Like, what did it mean? What did it do? It stands for Applied Behavior Analysis, just so everyone's clear. But on an actionable level, as a parent looking on in this therapy, you said 27 hours a week, I think I heard, which is like, you bet. It's like I'm reading a research article. Like, that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
What did you see? Like, how did it impact you, and what was the utility of this service?
Well, firstly, I will say that right after I got her diagnosis, all I was handed from the psychologist was a packet of ABA providers and no other information about autism,
Yep.
neurodiversity, other therapies, alternatives to ABA, just ABA. So insurance covers it. It's supposed to be the gold standard. I just went with it at that time. What it looked like for me, the way it started out is we would have the RBTs, who are the therapists, like feet on the ground working with your kid,
Yep.
in my home. And I loved that because I could see how they were working with her and I could see how she was responding to them and I could be learning. And it looked like them playing. Like, it looked like them playing, but then they carried around an iPad and they were tracking data based on the goals set for my child. And so there was a lot of like just playing, and then indicating what my kid did or didn't do. And that's really what it looked like. And what I loved about what my kiddo experienced, both of them with ABA, is their no's were always honored. If they say no, don't want that. No, I don't want to do that. It was always, thank you for telling me no. Like, it was, they were not at a table being drilled. They weren't being forced. Any goals that I'm not comfortable with, I have a voice in. I don't want to have eye contact goals. We don't have them. Just like, it's just been a really positive experience. But for parents who don't really know, there is a lot of debate around ABA. There are a lot of autistic adults who feel that they were traumatized by what they experienced in ABA. And so, like, there's these two sides that, like, ABA is trauma, ABA is bad, but like ABA is life-changing, ABA is the gold standard. And then you as the parent have to just decide, well, what feels good to me? And you have to get really picky about what provider you choose.
Oh boy, I love that point, because we've done some live streams in the past with ABA providers, and you're doing a great job summarizing. And they say, there ABA that could occur that's not ideal. Yep, 100%. But it's due to the ABA provider, and ABA. I mean, there's terrible physicians. There's terrible.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that all are bad, but I do think you bring a really good point up, and I like too that. I think it's a really powerful message that you have. It's very empowering to parents. It's like, look, you can figure out, maybe you can't figure out everything with ABA, but you can figure out a lot. Oh, and I really like that you're like, hey, oftentimes when I see families, I say, what are they working on? Like, what are the goals? Because they'll come in and there's a transition difficulty, or there's maybe somebody who's got self-injury, or, we see individuals that are up against a lot of obstacles. And then I'll ask, well, what are they working on in ABA? And they'll say, well, we're working on eye contact, or we're working on, I don't know, something. And then I say, it's okay for you to advocate for therapeutic interventions and goals that are most helpful for your family. It's okay. Yeah. It's you. This is you. Like, you don't have to, it's okay to, and ABA providers in general, in my experiences, they're open to that. And you did that. Okay. So now my next question, to what end? Because you said 27 hours a week. Now, I'm assuming were all the therapies under the same roof? Was it combined, like speech and OT and all the stuff was with ABA?
It wasn't.
No. Okay.
No, some clinics do offer that on site, like collaborative. My ABA was just ABA.
Right.
And then, speech and OT was separate.
So you were putting, miles on the tread. You were spending a lot of time in these places. And I think, sometimes people ask, like, well, how long? How long do
Yeah.
we do this? Like, do we wait for them to discharge us? Do we, kind of push through the plateau in the therapeutic, in terms of the data and the progress? Do you still have a child receiving ABA? Are all tell me about that. Like, who's getting
Yeah.
ABA? And how did it end?
My two little girls that are 3.5 and 5 are still in this ABA based community preschool. It's run like a preschool, 8 to
Yeah.
12, 5 days a week. And
Wow.
then 2 days a week, they stay longer for one-on-one therapies. But my 5-year-old is going to essentially graduate from this program in June of this year. So in a couple months, she's done. She can't keep going there. I've been shopping for a school for her. Um, I I was convinced that I was gonna be done with ABA like when she's done this summer. Like I don't feel like we need to do it anymore actually for either of them.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
However, the school that I have settled on it took me a year to settle on. Happens to be a brand spanking new ABA based like elementary school, high school combo that's being created by this amazing autism dad and mom because they have an autistic son that's 12 and there was nothing that they loved for him, so they are making their own dang school. And like it's going to be this hybrid with like RBTs
Wow.
as aides and
Wow.
certified teachers, like amazing. I think it's going to be amazing, but it's not going to be heavy like treatment
Okay.
goals, iPads. Like it's not going to be that kind of ABA.
Okay. And you mentioned, and just one more clarifying point on this. You mentioned in-home ABA, if I heard you correctly. Did I get that right? Was there a portion of it that was in your home, or was it facility or center based? At all? Like, can you give us a little clarity on that? Because
Yeah.
most people in the state of Iowa are going to go to a center. There are some in-home therapy,
Yeah.
and they're fantastic, but it's mostly center based in part. Tell us about that.
Right. So here in Arizona, we could access center based where you take your kid there.
Yeah.
You can opt for in home, or I where I send my girls. It's not like a center. It's literally like a school. It's called the Southwest Autism Research and Resource Center Community School, and it literally is set up like 4 preschool classrooms.
Cool.
But I don't know. Call it a center if you want. But they started out in home. Eventually, we just decided we don't want it done because I had teenagers too, and it was kind of disruptive to the family dynamic. So as soon as we could, and as soon as we felt comfortable, we're like, let's take these one-on-one sessions out of the home. We'll just have them on site at campus. Once we got through naps and that time span, all the stuff. So there's options, and you just have to choose what feels good to you to do.
Nice. Okay. Okay. And then, so rounding it out, you had a third child. I'm going to make some assumptions now. You picked things up pretty quick. You knew it. Am I right? Were you kind of, or you were like surprised? Were you surprised?
Well, I'll explain just really quick because you would think, okay, I was definitely tracking milestones. I had an app in my phone. I was like, oh, she's clapping,
Yes.
she's pointing, she's waving, she's talking. Like,
App. Yes.
okay, we're on track. She's bringing her baby doll to me, all the stuff. And then, so
Yeah.
I was gonna. The school where the girls go, it's half typically developing kids and half autistic kids in each classroom.
Okay. Nice.
I was going to send her as a typical peer. It was 18 months. She was 18 months, and I took her to her pediatrician for her 18-month checkup, and she had started toe walking at 16 months. And I was like, okay, let's watch this. I talked to the pediatrician. She's like, she's talking better than my 2-year-olds. I'm not worried about her. And so 3 weeks later, I go to have her assessed to go in as a typical peer to the school. And they essentially, I didn't know they were doing this. The assessment was the ADOS, like the autism assessment. That's their assessment to see where that kid if that kid can come in as a typical or a treatment kid. And so my daughter who's hit all her milestones is getting this ADOS assessment in front of me, and she is not responding to her name that great. She wants to leave halfway through the appointment. She's not looking up and engaging like she should. Like there was just a little bit. And so they were like, she scored moderate like risk for autism. You should have her assessed. And I was actually gut punched because I thought I was tracking it and I didn't see it. I still didn't see it. Her symptoms were very
Mhm.
subtle, obviously, very subtle.
Yeah.
And I honestly thought I could make a case either way.
Yeah.
If you met her now, Dr. Noble, I would bet you would, she does not meet criteria for autism. I
Right.
don't think she does.
Yeah.
If she does, it would be more on that PDA profile if you know that much about it.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
more of the demand avoidance type behaviors is what
Right.
I will see from her, if anything.
Yeah.
But also, she was diagnosed at 19 months accidentally, and she started receiving treatment right away. I don't know if support right
Yeah.
away, services
Yeah.
right away. Did we just catch things
Hmm.
really early? Like
Right.
she's been having ABA, no speech, no OT, nothing. But it's just been like going to preschool every day for a couple years at this point, and she's absolutely thriving.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah, you bring up a good point. It's like, is it the benefit of early intervention? Is it, what is it? But regardless, the proof is in the pudding. Like, this kid's doing great. You're right. These kids come in. I'm like, yep, your past may have been a thing, but your future's not. So let's just keep moving forward. Let's do rear view. Let's do windshield, not rear view. Let's go.
Yeah.
Okay. Very, very good. So I could talk to you for a long time, but I do have some things I want to learn specifically. What do you want? You've done an excellent job of advocating. Not every parent is going to be maybe is comfortable or has quite the experience. It sounds like, from your perspective, and I'm summarizing, I want to get this right. Oftentimes the families that remind me of you are the ones that just they don't take no for an answer. Like, they just, because, like you had like your third child that we just discussed, they meet the criteria. I mean, they're meeting their milestones. Okay. So how big of a deal could this be? But not a checkbox doesn't really quantify some of the nuanced personal, social, emotional skill sets. So I'm assuming that from your perspective that you would encourage families, look, you just got to push forward. You just got to knock down doors, make the calls. Is there anything from your perspective that you think you would like people to know about the medical profession, about people like me? Like, is there things that you're like,
Well,
yeah, when you get these guys or do you get these gals, say this because they won't listen to you? Like, tell us about that.
I think developmental pediatricians like yourself are probably good to go, generally speaking. I think your average run of the mill pediatrician, I know for a fact, they're not receiving education in autism to the degree of which they can truly identify it through a quick M chat and a 5
Right.
minute chat with you.
Right. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think if in your gut you think something is off, or if someone mentions to you, a teacher or a therapist, hey, maybe you should get this looked at. I think the key is to not be afraid of autism.
Yeah.
Like, to realize it's not a death sentence. It's not bad to have that designation. It unlocks it unlocks the ability to serve your child in so
Yeah.
many ways.
Yep. Yep. Okay. I agree. I agree 100%. That's a whole nother live stream. We could talk about why that
Yeah.
happened and what that is. I have one more question for you about, and this is for me to learn, and I think maybe a lot of people learn. A lot of times when people receive a diagnosis and I've heard this so many times, they receive a diagnosis and they get on a Facebook group, okay, in Phoenix,
Mhm.
Arizona, and they get in there and they're looking for advice. They're just looking for wisdom, and they use the wrong word, and then everything falls apart, right? An example would be, do I refer to my child as autistic? Do I refer to them as having an autism spectrum disorder? I'm just asking, I just did a panel last week and I asked people, it's like, educate us, because we don't know. Do we celebrate autism acceptance? Is it autism awareness? I feel like we're all aware, but what? So, from your perspective as a parent, how do you handle these questions, and how would you prefer that people speak to you about the nuances of language as it relates to this situation?
Okay. I really love this. Well, I have a couple thoughts. I have taken the lead in what language I use from autistic adults,
Mhm.
kind of the
Right.
community at large, who is saying they prefer to be referred to as autistic, not a person who has autism. Um, these nuances in, do I call my child nonverbal or non-speaking? Which
Right.
one is more like the infinity symbol or the puzzle piece, and like there's all these debates, and like
Yeah.
I think you should maybe do your best to educate yourself on what are the most politically correct words to use. Okay, if you have the mental capacity to do that and implement it. But I think at the end of the day, most autism parents are fighting through that day, and they don't have time to think about if they use the
Yeah.
right word.
Agreed. Yes.
They just need love and support, and we need to just love and support each other.
Yes. And it's not to make light of the question. I know it's important and it's valuable, but you're right. The people that I endeavor to serve on a day-to-day basis are not stopping me and saying, whoa, 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 I need you to say that different. Like, there's other issues that seem to be more pressing, like insomnia or aggression or transition difficulties. Not that that's everybody who has an autism diagnosis, who's autistic. Not everybody has those things, but the people that we endeavor to serve in our clinic, usually those are the big ticket issues that we're trying to solve. So there's a lot more questions I could ask you about medicines and about genetic testing and about school and how you all these things. But I feel like they'll probably have to wait. You've been an absolutely fantastic guest. I'm sorry that we started out jagged, but we'll clean it up on the upload. We'll clean it up. I promise.
It's been so fun to talk to you, and maybe we'll just have to do this again.
Absolutely, we will. So can you just tell us, where can we find you? Tell us about, I'm going to put up this real quick. I want to remind everybody, and I want to come back to you so you can remind us how to find you. April 27th through the 29th, the Autism Savvy Summit, autismsavvy.com. And you have a great website. You have a great thing. Tell people, how can they find you? How can they connect? How can they follow?
So check out autismsavvy.com. Come to the summit, get your free ticket if you can. If you missed the event in real time, there's options to see it on the back end inside of my Infinity Mom Club community. You can learn about that at autismsavvy.com. And then follow me on like Instagram and TikTok at Autism Savvy.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Amber. I appreciate your time, energy, and resources, and I hope we can meet again soon. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right, boss. I'll see you later. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining. If you're watching this on the upload, put in your questions and comments, and we'll get back to you. Sincerely, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.